We will be giving a brief overview of contract management. Our group consists of James, Holly, Ivan, Ian, Marco, and Natalie. Contract types. There are three different price-based contracts. Fixed price, where the supplier is paid a fixed price or lump sum for the entire project. The terms fixed or firm usually indicate that the price will not be subject to escalation payments, whereas lump sum contracts may. Additionally, fixed and firm contracts generally may not include variation clauses. However, the terms fixed and firm have no precise meaning. The payment terms included within a specific contract are the key factor. Measurement, where a list of the items and quantities of the work to be executed under the contract is incorporated into the bid contract documentation. The purchaser pays a standard rate based on agreed upon productivity rates and unit rates. Remeasurement, where the actual work carried out by the supplier is measured on completion, is implemented based upon either an approximate bill of quantities, a schedule of rates, or a bill of materials. Cost-based contracts are another type of contract. A cost-plus contract, where the supplier is reimbursed all their entitled expenditure plus an agreed-upon profit margin, which can either be a percentage of the final cost or a fixed amount. Cost-based contracts have the benefit of being more collaborative, but they impose a much lower degree of control on the supplier, requiring more managerial effort by the purchaser. Compared with the price-based contracts, the level of risk borne by the supplier will reduce, while that of the purchaser will rise. However, the contract will contend with high levels of changes. In a contract, there are usually two parties. These two parties are the purchaser and the supplier. The purchaser is the party that acquires or obtains goods or services by payment or at some cost. They will also be involved in defining what services are to be provided, setting service levels, providing relevant and timely information to the project manager and supplier, and informing the project manager of underperformance. A supplier is the provider of goods and services. The degree of empowerment of a supplier is dependent upon the procurement approach adopted and the terms of the contract. Generally, the supplier will be responsible for deciding how to provide a service, delivering the service to specification, deciding priorities to achieve said service, and meeting purchaser requirements within the contract terms and budget. The supplier will also be responsible for monitoring the service delivery performance, development and implementation of agreed procedures, and providing information as required by the contract. Risks and responsibilities. Contracts set down the right and obligations of the parties within the contract and describe the responsibilities and procedural roles of those named within the contract. Ideally, the allocation of risk between the parties should be based upon the following. A managerial principle is the satisfactory completion of a project that is more likely to be achieved through effective planning and supervision rather than requiring guarantees imposing rights to damages by default. A commercial principle is a risk that should be held by the party best able, economically to control, manage, or insure against its consequences. Legal principles would consist of unfair contract terms, for example, penalties that may not be enforceable. Contract management has been defined as the process which ensures that all parties to a contract fully understand their respective obligations, enabling these to be fulfilled as efficiently and as effectively as possible to provide even better value for money. This process commences with the identification of the purchaser's needs and concludes with the completion of the contract. Further, the process has two dominant characteristics: risk identification, apportionment, and management, which are related to contract performance, and relationship management, which is between the purchaser and the supplier. A contract is an agreement between two parties under which one party promises to do something for the other in return for consideration, usually a payment. This places obligation on both parties to fulfill their part of the agreement. It is also the foundation for the relationship between the parties. Elements of a valid contract usually vary depending upon the country of origin. While contracts can take the form of a single document, generally commercial contracts are comprised of several documents. The contract agreement itemizes the documents comprising the contract. It includes the identities of the parties and defines the scope of work, the contract price, and the schedule for its execution. General specification and scope of work describe the scope of work to be undertaken, the technical standards required, and the administrative procedures that control the implementation of the project. General conditions of contract are normally a recognized standard form of contract. This details the obligations to produce and to pay, clarifies the offer and acceptance, allocates risks, describes the consequences of failure to pay or produce, and includes relevant issues, for example, insurances, bonds, safety, industrial relations, defects, disputes, and so on. Special conditions of contract. These cover additions and amendments to the general conditions as required by the purchaser and specific circumstances of the project. Administrative and coordination procedures. Frequently, the procedural aspects of a contract are covered separately as an appendix to the general conditions. Legally, there is no distinction between the terms contract and order. Both refer to legally binding agreements for the supply of goods and/or services in return for some form of remuneration. Commonly, the term contract is used in relation to an agreement involving a longer time period and a greater outlay than a purchase order. In parallel to the contract between the purchaser and the supplier employs subcontractors and suppliers of materials, plants, equipment, services, and so on. The supplier is generally held responsible for any subcontractor work, and the purchaser, within the main contract, retains the right to vet any subcontractors and limit the extent to which the work is subcontracted. The supplier may be free to choose the terms of subcontracts, or, alternatively, the terms may be required to correspond back-to-back with those of the main contract. Purchasers may also reserve the right to nominate subcontractors. Contracts therefore require specific clauses to manage specific risks imposed by nomination. Dispute resolution. Dispute resolution is comprised of 6 different steps. The first step, prevention, includes risk allocation, incentive for cooperation, and partnering. Negotiation is the first reaction taken if prevention fails. This is followed by standing neutral, which would include a dispute review board and dispute resolution advisor. Non-binding resolution would include mediation, a mini-trial, and adjudication, while binding resolution would include arbitration, and finally, litigation would proceed to follow a judge. Financial guarantees are issued by banks, insurance companies, surety companies, or a parent company, so that funds will be available should the purchaser have a legitimate claim against the supplier. A tender guarantee is typically required by purchasers to ensure that once a bid has been submitted, the supplier can be held to it and to help exclude suppliers who lack the necessary financial resources to complete the contract. They will virtually always be conditional and have a time limit. Repayment guarantees are usually incorporated where an advance payment is involved. They can either be on-demand or conditional. An on-demand bond permits the purchaser to invoke the guarantee without having to establish default, while under a conditional guarantee, the purchaser can only invoke the guarantee once the supplier has admitted a breach of contract or upon a ruling of court or an arbitration that the supplier is in default. A performance guarantee seeks to ensure that a purchaser can recover damages in the event of a supplier's failure to perform. Again, they may be classified as on-demand or conditional. Retention guarantee. An alternative to retention clause, as discussed earlier, while the purchaser may consent to this arrangement from the start of the contract, retention guarantees are more commonly used during the maintenance period, that is, upon attaining practical completion. A surety bond is the usual form of guarantee in North America. They vary significantly from the principle of indemnity. Rather than merely paying the amount of the bond following a default, the emphasis is on the surety organizing the completion of a project. A performance and payments bond is usually required on all publicly bid construction projects and may be required on some private projects.